My Comic Shop History is brought to you in part by the following sponsors. The Hive Comics and Games is an oasis of nerd fun and events in the heart of Odessa, Texas. Whether it's comic book superhero stories or role-playing in a dungeon, the Hive is where to be. Come tap your mana and face off against the top Magic the Gathering players in West Texas. Hive carries a majority of new comic titles each Wednesday and has all of your favorite titles in their back issue section. Follow them on Facebook at The Hive Comics and on Instagram at The Hive Comic Shop. Movie lovers should check out this family of film festivals: the Brightside Tavern Film Festival in Jersey City, the Hang On to Your Shorts Film Festival in Asbury Park, and the Point Lookout Film Festival on Long Island. Submission information for filmmakers, as well as details about the festivals generally, can be found at filmfreeway.com. Also, be sure to listen to the podcasts hosted by the festival's organizer, CJ Cullen. You can find the official Hang On to Your Shorts podcast, as well as the Cullen on Film podcast, via a shared universe network. Alternate Realities has been gone for over 5 years, but our community lasts forever. And now, in these dark times, the AR signal lights up the night sky, and the old gang is ready to answer the call as we celebrate a year's worth of holidays together. This is the LongAR Halloween. Welcome to the LongAR Halloween, a My Comic Shop history tale. I am your host, Anthony Desiato. This is part 8, Mother's Day, and for this episode, I am joined, appropriately enough, by my mother, Moschella Desiato.
Thanks, Anthony. It's a pleasure to be on the show with you. I'm really excited.
Yes, I'm happy to have you. You were getting a call as we were starting the episode here, but that's all right. I think someone's leaving you a message literally as we're doing this.
Oh, I didn't know if you would be able to hear that or not.
We hear everything at Flat Squirrel Productions. It's all right. It's okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. So, welcome to the show. This is your podcast debut.
Yes, it is. I'm so happy to be on. I've listened to you, and now I get the opportunity to put my say into things.
Yes. So, longtime followers of Flat Squirrel Productions might recall you did make an on-screen appearance in my very first film, My Comic Shop documentary. The New York Times, in their article about me, noted that you and I sat stiffly on the couch during the during the interview. I don't know what they wanted. Did they want us like cuddling on the couch? I mean, that wasn't going to happen. I felt like we were sitting normally.
Well, yeah, me too. But again, maybe just the demeanor of you being serious. And I wanted to make sure I did everything correctly, like how I sat, how I moved my hands. If I was, I believe I might have been holding comic books in my hand. No, you don't think so?
No.
So maybe that's why. But yeah, I don't know what they expected us to do. We could have laughed.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I was a little more serious then. I've loosened up even more since those days. But even though this is the first time that I'm talking to you on the show, I've talked about you a number of times over the years because, you played a large role in my comic shop history. You brought me to almost all of the other than these past few years where I've been going around with the podcast and the documentary. Everything leading up to that, shops in Westchester and Manhattan. You took me to all those stores when I was a kid, despite the fact, as I always say, that you weren't the biggest fan of me reading comics.
Well, first of all, let me say that I really enjoyed bringing you to all the comic stores because you really liked going there. You liked getting the material. You were so excited. And I had fun, and I got to look around, and I got to see the different people, and I got to talk to everyone. So I liked it. The thing about comics was, in my generation growing up, that was never anything encouraged to read. So when you wanted to read those, I felt, okay, but you need to be reading more books and educational material. However, I see that your brightness, goes beyond the comic books, and, not reading everything academic and intellectual did not hurt you in any way. So it's okay. But it had a whole different context, though. The comic books were not considered like good reading material. And that was kind of where that came from. But I still loved going every place. I loved going to the mall. And then I liked when we would go into the city to the different comic shops. And I'd walk around looking at everything. And, and it was just great to see you get so excited. Like when you go with your list and you were looking for certain back issues. So it was a lot of fun for me. And we even went into the city
Yeah, no, it's very true. And I mean, so I want to kind of unpack, why you had the view of comics that you did, because I think it is interesting. And I definitely understand now, why you felt that way about comics. But let me also say this, and I've said this on the show before, but let me say it to you. And I think it's the most important thing that I can say on this episode, which is that it almost means more that you took me to all of those places, despite the fact that you didn't really want me reading this. I mean, I think that's really a testament to, your love and the fact that you wanted me to have, this thing that I enjoyed, even though you weren't fully on board with it. So, it's like, yeah, in retrospect, would it have been, would it have been nice if you were like, Anthony, it's great that you love comics, but yeah, that would have been nice. But the fact that you still took me to all those places, I always, to this day appreciate it. And obviously it really set me on a path here. So I appreciate that you, allowed that and really fostered that despite not loving the comics.
Right. Well, but also, too, I wanted to make sure that you got the most out of everything. Just like when you used to watch Power Rangers, you used to watch it all day long. And I said, okay, he wants to watch it, but what can I make out of this that he can get more academic out of it? And I used to have you write little stories, a few sentences afterwards. So I wanted you to do everything, but I just wanted to make sure too, as a parent, that I was giving you enough, that I was making your academics as broad as possible. So while you do what you enjoy, but at the same time, you're getting something beneficial out of it.
Yeah.
Because maybe I didn't have that. And so I wanted to make sure that you had the full scope of everything that you did.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. I know. I always think about that. The stories that I wrote about Power Rangers. I have some. I mean, when we sold the house and I cleared out so much stuff, I kept, because I had pretty much everything from my child, like every test, every homework. Had everything, and so I didn't have the room to keep everything, but I kept the stuff that meant the most, and I kept those little Power Ranger stories. So yeah, the fact that you made me, encouraged me to, well, I guess it really was, I think it was a requirement for watching Power Rangers, was that I write about it after.
3 sentences and then you could watch another one.
Yeah. No, but that's the thing. And I mean, I think that really, cultivated this love of writing that I still have to this day. So I think that was wonderful. And, the fact that you wanted to make sure I was reading things in addition to comics, I think that's great too. And at the time, I think I appreciated it because I enjoyed the other things that I read. So I don't think I ever did that necessarily begrudgingly, but definitely now I look back and I really see the value in it. So I think that was a great call on your part, because it is important to be well-rounded. And, it's like, I don't know if Milo will be into comics. If he is, that's wonderful. If not, that's okay too. But, even if he is, it's like, I wouldn't only want him to read comics. I want him to read all kinds of stuff. So I think that was a good call.
Well, and also I saw that you had the potential and you had the capabilities, that you were able to, enjoy that, and then you could go on and move on and do something more with it. Just like when you didn't really want to go to law school, and I figured, but you have the potential, you have the capability, so you may as well just go and do it because you can. If you couldn't, that would be something else. And if you didn't have a good writing ability, if I saw you struggled, I would not have continued to make you write the stuff, and if the best reading you could do was with the comic books, with the pictures, because that helps you with comprehension, then that would have been okay too. But I knew that you could do more than that. And so that's why I pushed those other things. And I would still push you with things, but I can't anymore.
Listen, I think I do enough.
No, you do. But I'm just saying, as a mother, you always want your children to do as much as they possibly can. And so, but now it's, different roles.
Just do me a quick favor. If it's easy enough, could you just take off the necklace? Because I'm hearing as it's hitting against it a little bit.
Oh. And I hear some other noise too.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on in the back. It's quiet here, so I don't know what might be in the back. It's okay. I mean, it's nothing that's it's very faint. I don't know that our listeners would even pick up on that. But thank you for the necklace. So yeah, like I said, I wanted to talk a bit about your history or lack thereof, with comic books. So, I mean, you grew up in not to date you, but you grew up in the 60s and 70s. People can do the math.
Impossible. I'm only 25. What are you talking about?
But I mentioned that there is a reason why I bring it up because, the Adventures of Superman TV series with George Reeves, that aired in the 50s, but then it started airing in syndication probably that period in the 60s when you were growing up. So did you watch that as a kid?
Yes, that was the Superman that I always watched. The Adventures of Superman from 1951 to 1958 was when it actually came out. And then later on. And so those are the ones that I grew up watching. Look up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's Superman. And that was with George Reeves. And that was the one that, I grew up with. And I loved Superman. Oh, my goodness. And actually, my brother, when I was about 10, he was 10 years older than me, he told me he was Superman. And sometimes, he would go out and then he'd come back. And I said, where'd you go? And he would be like, oh, I flew to, California. I said, you flew and now you came back. So, I mean, I really liked Superman and I believed that there was a Superman.
Now, and there's that great photo, and I'll post it in the Flat Squirrel Podcast Network Facebook group, which I encourage everyone to join. There's a photo. Do you remember how old you were? You're in the kitchen and you're dressed in the Superman costume.
Yeah, I may have been 4 or 5, I want to say. I think that's how old I was. But yeah, the Superman was a big thing. Your grandfather, those comics came out when he was a kid. So he always talked about Superman, and then it was really a big thing for a while. And then, of course, later on in 1978, the Christopher Reeve movies came out, and then it became popular. I guess I was maybe a teenager then, but and again, I wasn't as into it. I liked watching it, but as a kid, I loved it.
Yeah, no, and well, it's funny because, as you know, and listeners know if they checked out Digging for Kryptonite, but I just did this big deep dive into Adventures of Superman with Rich Roney, and it was, it was fascinating, and it was really like being transported back in time watching those old episodes, and I really enjoyed them. So for you watching them as a kid, did you even know about the comics at that point?
I don't think so. I don't recall ever knowing about them. I never really saw anybody reading them. I don't think I ever noticed them. I probably didn't go to a bookstore, but if I did, I probably didn't notice them. So no, I really didn't know much about the comics other than later on, in high school, I guess I heard kids say they read a comic book, but nothing that I ever reached out and tried to read or get familiar with.
Now, unbeknownst to listeners, I pressed record. I pressed pause on the recording just for a couple of minutes there. We pinpointed the source of the little noise that I was hearing. It was your earrings, and I just mentioned this because we had a laugh because I said I didn't even think about this ahead of time because virtually everyone who's been on the show, especially in over this past year, it's all been guys. So we haven't run into the issue of someone wearing jewelry.
And so that tells me you need to have more women on the show.
That's true. Well, you're here, and I think we're going to have Carolyn on an upcoming episode of the LongAR Halloween. And we'll see. We'll see as we're moving forward. I'm always happy to open this up to people who want to talk about whether it's comics or Superman or comic shops, whatever the case may be. So, okay, so mystery solved. All right. Again, I don't think that was. Hopefully, that wasn't annoying to listeners, and I was just hearing it in my headphones, so I'm glad we were able to get to the bottom of that. So, okay, so you watched Adventures of Superman as a kid, didn't really have much of a sense that this was a comic book character, right? But do you remember seeing a comic or seeing people with comics at any point, or seeing comics on the newsstand? Do you have any memory? And it's okay if you don't. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I may have going in the candy store. We used to have a candy store on the corner, and they had you could have soda and buy newspapers, and there were comic books in there, but I don't think I ever really picked one up, to look at it or to go through it really until you started reading them. When that's when I really looked at them, and I did think this would have been a great venue for kids that have trouble with comprehension, because you have a picture and you have the words, and that's so helpful. That more books maybe should have those kinds of illustrations, especially when kids are just learning how to read. So I think, I think they're good. Again, just the grammar was not perfect in them. So that was, not my most favorite, like when you started reading them. So, but once you master the grammar and then you read them, obviously, you know what's correct. But if that's all you're reading and, you're not doing well in school, that would probably not be a good thing to continue with.
Right. And, again, in your defense, comic book storytelling and sensibilities and the level of sophistication, all of that has evolved a lot over the decades. Right. And, in particular, and I know because I know we've talked about this over the years, and I think I wrote a paper about it in college, but, I think it was the 40s, right? We had this psychologist, Frederick Wertham, who wrote this book, Seduction of the Innocent, about how comics were poisoning America's youth, and there were Senate inquiries, and the outcome of that was that the comic book industry really neutered itself. They created the Comics Code Authority, which was their self-censorship body. And the stories really started to become written much more for children. And, it's funny because now, I'm doing the Superman show and I'm delving into the history a little bit more. And the original Superman in the 30s and early 40s, he was, literally described as a crusader for the oppressed. He was not a symbol of the status quo. He was really, the first issue, he's busting into the governor's mansion because someone's going to be executed for a crime they didn't commit. He was very much that social crusader. And then when they really kind of softened it and made it even more for kids, he became more of the symbol of the status quo. So there definitely was that shift. And I think it's really been over these past few decades where comics have been written more for an adult audience. Thankfully, there are still plenty of comics that are written for all ages or for kids specifically. And that's good. There should be. You should have that. But certainly, I think the stuff that I was reading as a kid and the stuff that I've continued to read, there is a higher level of sophistication than the comics that would have been coming out that maybe you would have heard about. So again, the fact that you ended up with that conception of comics, it's I get it.
Right. No, and that's true, because when I did look at them later on, I said, it's not so bad. I didn't think it was as bad as, the thought that I had in my head. So, so it changed. It does. And they, that's how they capture a bigger audience of people too, to read them.
Right. But at what point, again, if you remember, at what point did you, I don't know, did you know of someone who read comics and they weren't smart, and then you associated that with, was that ever a thing or no?
No, but I don't think in school, I can only imagine in school, some kid having a comic book and the teacher was like, don't you dare read this, because, I went to Catholic school, they were all nuns, and you had to, read these books. It was really very, structured and disciplined, and no space for fun. So I can only imagine that it must have been something like that there were comics, somebody might have had them, and the teacher's like, oh my God, you can't read this. And that was my feeling, that It was not something to read. And I have to say, overall, too, in defense of comics, I just wasn't a big reader to begin with. I never really went and I got a book, sat down and read it. I'd rather watch TV or something. So, I wasn't a big fan of reading. And that was, how I was concerned about you, too, because I said, oh, maybe, he won't like to read, because I really didn't like to read. And, so it makes sense that I would have a feeling not to want you to read them or have that negative thought about the comics.
Right. I know this is jumping ahead, but I think it's relevant here because we've seen, in recent years, we've seen, you and I, and people generally, I think we've seen numerous instances of comics being embraced in an educational setting. Yeah. And I think, not that we use them in the class, but I think one of the earliest moments that kind of started to turn you around on comics a little bit was my 7th grade teacher, Mrs. Rinaldi. Now, again, she didn't use comics in the classroom, but what was the conversation that you had with her? Because I think this was a turning point.
Yeah, well, I did. I said, because she, said that you're very bright, you're very smart, and, you're such a good student. And I said, he does all his work and everything. I said, but he reads comic books. She said, so? I said, what do you mean? She said, it's okay, as long as he's reading. I said, really? She said, yeah, as long as he's reading. It doesn't matter what he's reading. Comic books are okay. Even the kids that read the cereal box is okay, as long as he's reading. And so at that moment, I said, oh, it doesn't matter like he's reading. And really, and she did point out for some kids that really struggle and don't want to read and won't read, if they will read a comic, that's a big plus. So it was after then that I said to myself, you know what, I think it's okay. I think he's learning, he's growing, and he could read the comics. But again, I didn't want you to only read that, because I remember there were summers, you just went through one comic book after another, and I'm like, read a book. So I guess, I still always have that in me. But yeah, she was like really instrumental in turning me around.
You know what's also funny? I was thinking about this because, in terms of the other things that I read, I don't know if you remember this, I was really into historical fiction.
Yes.
That was big. I don't know. I mean, I guess I did always like history and American history in particular. So maybe that was the motivation for that. But the other things that I read a lot of, and I know you remember these, Goosebumps and Animorphs.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about those is that those were serialized novels. They were novel series. Now with Goosebumps, those were, I mean, almost entirely standalone books, but you still had books in a series. And then Animorphs was an ongoing, continuing storyline, not at all dissimilar from comics, right? Like, I think I very much gravitated towards that style of storytelling.
Right. I agree. And the other thing I want to point out was when I used to go to all the comic book stores with you, I was interested to see who the other people were that were reading the comic books. So anytime I struck up a conversation with someone, I always tried to ask them like what line of work they were in, because I wanted to, make a connection there. And then after I saw there were lawyers reading them, and doctors and teachers, I was like, oh my God, it's okay. Because again, and not that I should, place everything on that. And I probably wouldn't do that now if I went into a store. But back then I did. But again, because again, I thought it was just mostly, I don't want to say anything negative, but more like the, blue collar tough man reading the comic books, not, the more sophisticated businessman per se.
Right. No, I understand.
If I'm being honest.
I know what you're saying. I think people, people understand, but, and right, not coming from a negative place, but I guess maybe like the education level, that was maybe, kind of what you were trying to get at. Because of course, right, everyone has value regardless of what profession.
Right.
But yeah, getting a sense, I guess, of that education level, since you had these goals for me, to go to law school. So I guess if everyone you talk to at the store only attained a certain level below that, you would feel like, oh no, like he's not going to make it. Do you need to retape the headphones? Because
no.
You have no. Oh, all right. It's okay. Mother's earbuds don't stay in her ears, so she's taped them like a champ, so that we have the best sound quality we can get over FaceTime here. So thank you.
I bet you're going to have to cut a lot of this out.
I'm not cutting anything. People love this. It's all right. Here's the thing. If I need to cut something, I will, but for the most part, I haven't. That's one of the reasons I've been able to produce as much as I have, because I'm not spending the time in post-production. And I mean, I really feel like we've had real smooth recordings, and that I haven't needed to edit. And also
until today.
No. I plan to put this ad. This is great. And it's because I've gotten a sense of the way people consume these podcasts. People are listening in the car as they're commuting, or on the train, or while they're cooking dinner, or they're walking their dog, and that's not to say that I put less into it, but it's not like they're necessarily, sitting poring over every word, and it's like, oh, I have to take out this little thing. And I like to think that people rather have more episodes than, a smaller amount of heavily edited ones. That's my feeling. But yeah, so that moment with Mrs. Rinaldi, I know that was big. So thank you to Mrs. Rinaldi, because that was a turning point. I mean, and the other thing too that I always kind of point to is that I had done well. I mean, I was the top of my class in elementary school, and then high school, and very near the top in college and law school. And I have to imagine that too, kind of softened those concerns, right? Because if the thing is like, well, he's not going to do well in school, but it's like, clearly he is. But the Mrs. Rinaldi thing I know was big. And then, going back to my comic shop documentary, I have that little segment in there with an English teacher at, I think it was like Ardsley High School, right? Who had a graphic novel library set up in his classroom.
Right.
And I think that made an impression too. I mean, again, by that point I was into law school, so you weren't telling me what I could read at that point, but again, just like seeing this, and there are other, because I've had people reach out to me who, again, some teachers who were customers at the store reach out to me because they were thinking about setting up something similar in their classroom. So that was actually something I wanted to ask you, because you've worked in the public school system for many, many years now. Do they utilize comics to any extent? Have you seen that?
Well, now in the libraries, they do have some graphic novels that kids can read. And I have to say, in the Edgemont High School library, kids did take out, the graphic novels and read them. But another point that I just thought about was when I was doing an internship in some of the schools, like in Yonkers and in the Bronx. A lot of kids there didn't want to read. And I would always suggest a comic book. And I believe a couple of times I might have even brought some in. And they did show interest and they did want to read it. And if that could be cultivated more, I always felt that they could have moved on to other things. But again, while in Edgemont they are there, that's not the focus, but kids do read them, kids do like them. And anytime that I would talk to any students about, I said my son and he's with the comic books, and I was surprised to find that so many kids did like comics and they do like them. And, then they'd start asking me a lot of questions and I'd say, okay, that's enough. But yeah, so it's not a big thing. But I'm sure that in different districts, it may be a bigger thing than in other districts, depending, on the culture of the school.
Right. Yeah, no, I get that. And, I guess going back to, asking the customers what they do for a living and, being surprised, right, at the range that you heard, that's the thing that, and, this is in my new movie, My Comic Shop Countries, one of the interviewees makes this point, and I use that because I thought it was really important that, comics are a medium, right? It's not a genre within something else. It's its own medium that contains all the same genres that you find in movies and novels and so on. So the idea that it's wow, all these different kinds of people read comics. It's yeah, just like all different kinds of people watch movies or listen to music or read books. Now, yes, I guess if you're talking strictly about superhero comics, maybe you'd find a little more more commonality there, but even there's so much variety. So, that's one thing that I think has become, thankfully, more understood. And yeah, it's great with kids in particular, and especially when kids aren't really into reading, to show them these things, because I think, like you said, having the visual component, on the one hand, it's great to read, prose, right? Because then you have to use your imagination. So that flexes one muscle. But when you have, this visual component, it can bring the story to life for you in a way that maybe if you aren't the best reader or you just don't like it, it kind of knocks down that hurdle for you. And I'm really going off on a spiel here, but even if you take out the words of comics, and there have been numerous times where publishers have put out silent issues, where there's a writer who's plotted it out, but it's really the artist bringing it to life. And the art in and of itself is its own storytelling. So, I think it's great for kids to have, exposure to that. And then, again, even though you haven't read comics, I know, again, you've watched some of the television shows and you're watching Superman and Lois now. And I think that, these stories, they tap into something that I think resonates with a lot of people. They're these larger than life stories, but ultimately, when you boil them down, like Superman, right? Someone who, is trying to figure out where he came from and how he's going to fit into the world. It's that's why it always drives me nuts when people are like, oh, he's not relatable. It's how is he not relatable? This is the most relatable thing to me, at least, trying to figure out what you're going to do and trying to do the right thing. And, so I think it's great for kids in particular to have that exposure.
Right. And also too, just when you were talking about, just the comic book with art, and today, teachers and educators are more aware that some kids are just visual learners. Way back when, nobody took that into consideration, that some kids, were only visual learners, and that, just the words weren't enough. So, in and of itself, that was they were probably way ahead of the time by just being, visual, because that's good for some kids. But yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, I forgot what I was going to say.
You have your notes there, which I'm very impressed by. You know, not it's
Yeah.
it's a mix. Some guests come with notes, other guests don't. So I'm always curious.
Well, I know you, so I figured I better have some notes. I don't want to get anything wrong.
No, you know what's so funny? Wait, I wanted to ask you about this because recently I recorded episodes with Bill Mayo and Rich Roney. And in both episodes, there were numerous times where they like Bill kept apologizing. He's like, "Oh, did you want me to talk about that then? Like, I'm sorry." And Rich similar. And I definitely said to Bill in the episode, I'm like, "Am I that bad?" Like.
Well, I have to say, you've really lightened up a lot from like the time I remember like being with you every day and as a kid and growing up. Like you were really, really like everything had to be right and perfect. And in my mind, that's how I still see you, you know? So it's like I said, I wrote down like the years the Superman was on, Dean Cain when he came on the scene, and then I have Smallville. And but the big thing that I wanted to say was that as much as I said I didn't like you reading comics, I was so happy to look for anything Superman related, bed sheets, costume, like all, because I knew you liked that. But during that time when you really got into it, there wasn't a lot of stuff because everything had calmed down, all Superman and Batman and Robin and all that. It was kind of like a little lull. And so it was so hard for me. And the one thing I always wanted to get you was a Superman lunchbox, and I couldn't get it. It was like when you were in, elementary school. And now, and then when I started seeing everything, when the movies came out, I always was like, I had resentment because I was like, why couldn't they have had this when he was reading the comics? So I always, and then even when you got your first car, I got you Superman car mats. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
So as much as, I may have said don't read them, but I was more than happy to get all the other stuff that went along with it. And of course, then I sort of somehow lost you a little bit when you went into the statues, because that was a little too much. And especially when you would ask me like to name them and I couldn't remember the names like you did with the Power Rangers.
Yeah.
Like, oh, what's Trini? What's the Red Ranger? What's the Blue Rider? Oh, you gave me little tests. So when it came to the statues, I was like, oh no. But I do see you have a little statue up there of Superman, and we got that on a trip to the city when we went to FAO Schwartz, which has since closed. And you were really young, and I saw that, and I was like, "Oh, Anthony, look, Superman!" I called it the Superman doll, but we got it, and you still have it.
I still have.
As I see.
So a couple of things. So. It was generous of you to call it a statue. It is a doll. I fully admit that is a doll. It's it's plastic. It has the all the qualities that you would expect in a doll, the size of it. Now, right below it, or right next to it, are actual statues, cold cast porcelain statues. Yeah. But yeah, I'm fine saying that it is a doll. I mean, there's no way around it. And yeah, I treasure that. I mean, I've kept that through all the moves. I mean, that's something that, unless something happens to it, I never plan to part with it. And yeah, I appreciate that you always, looked for the merchandise and you got it for me. It's very nice. Although on the other hand, it's like, well, what a mixed message. You're telling me, don't read comics, don't read. And then you're like, here's all this stuff. It's like, well, what am I supposed to do with that? But no, I know that's the thing. I know there wasn't. Well, it's funny because, I'm in a few Facebook groups now for Superman collectors, and I see people posting stuff, and there's old stuff. But I think that, yeah, in that time, like the late 80s, early 90s, I do think there was a little bit of a lull. And, the other thing, too, is that even if there was stuff being made or older stuff that was still attainable, you didn't have eBay or Amazon. Like they didn't have the means necessarily to track this stuff down, whereas you do now, which is cool. So no, I appreciate that you always looked for stuff, and even though it was challenging, I mean, look, I guess it made me appreciate the things that I did have more, like that doll. I mean, I always kept that doll and that little figure.
I was just gonna say that we got that KB. That it was metal too, that little Superman figure. Because I used to take you to the stores on shopping sprees, and I used to say, pick out whatever you want. And that I remember that day I said, Superman! And that was like the whole beginning of it. And I was like, oh my God, wait till I show Grandpa, because he really knew about Superman. And and then that started it.
Yeah.
And the reading of comics started when I believe you had a Christmas show, and I didn't go because I went out to dinner with my work group, and your father took you to Dairy Dell, and you picked up a comic, and he read it to you, and then you started from there.
No, Mother, you're conflating two stories. You're conflating two.
No.
The that was sort of because I had fallen out of it a little bit, and that that post-Christmas show, Dairy Dell visit, got me back into it. But no, my goodness, the Heroes World, Death of Superman, that was the beginning.
Oh, that's right. Oh my goodness.
I've told this
story. I'm so nervous. I got it wrong.
Please don't be nervous. Please don't be. It's quite all right.
Yes, we were walking in the mall and we saw Superman in a box. And I said, oh my God, the Death of Superman.
Yeah. Well, so actually, I mean, I don't know that I've ever asked you this, but but I want to go back for a second. So, all right, you watched the George Reeves TV series. Then, yes. I mean, do you remember seeing that first Christopher Reeve movie in the theater?
Yes. You did? The first one, definitely in the theater. I mean, then there were multiple ones after that. I may have seen them, but I don't think I had as much interest in them. Like the first one I really liked, but then they went all different directions with them.
Yeah,
I mean,
the subsequent ones, I recently I used to really like the second one, and I rewatched it, and it didn't hold up for me, but I know other people still regard it very highly. And then 3 and 4, pretty much everyone agrees were a mess. But so you liked the first one?
Oh yeah, I liked it. Yeah. And I must have been about, maybe 19, 20, 18, 19, 20 when it came out. And so, yeah, I mean, I really liked it.
What'd you like about it? Do you remember? I mean, like, what was it that stood out?
Well, I think I remember just the whole story of Superman, from being a kid. I mean, it was different. But, the fact that he, was out there and he rescues people and he helps the weak and, he could do all these things. And yet there's a whole human side of him, too, that he's just a guy working and, likes a girl, is not sure she's going to like him. I mean, that, so there's always that like boy girl stuff. But I mean, I just think it was, he's a hero. He's a hero and he can, I mean, we know obviously people don't fly, but I mean, it's just the whole, you get hyped up and the costume, and so it's a whole thing.
Yeah, no, for sure. And like you said, that, he helps everybody. I mean, I think that's the thing that, especially now, as I've been exploring the character even more on the other show, I think this idea that he has the powers of a god, like he could do anything. And the fact that he chooses to use them in this way, I think just makes such an impression. And, again, people always talk about, Batman as a more relatable character. And I think Batman, is more believable. I mean, because like you said, people can't fly. There's right. A possibility that if you had the money and the drive, you could be Batman. But in terms of relatability, I think this idea of someone who was just raised with good values and tries to be a friend and neighbor out in the world, I think that's so much more relatable. But the reason why we're talking so much about Superman is, you had the George Reeves show, then the Christopher Reeve movie. And I can't help but wonder, like, when we're in the early 90s and we're in the Galleria Mall in White Plains at wintertime and we come across Heroes World and we see that Death of Superman, I mean, do you think you were more receptive to it because you knew who like if it had been The Flash and you were like, I have no idea who that character is. I mean, you probably still would have gotten me the comic anyway, but do you think like it made a difference that it was Superman, someone you knew?
Oh yeah, I think definitely because I mean, I knew who Superman was. I was like, oh my God, he's in a box. That's all I keep thinking about. Oh my God, he's in a box. What did they do? Remember, and then we went into the store and it was like, I said, oh my God, the Death of Superman. Like it was a shock to me too that, it went to that level. But, it definitely because it was Superman. I mean, I knew Batman, I knew Superman, but that was about it. All the other comic heroes that, you are involved with, I don't really know who they are, like Flash and Green Arrow and Lantern. And I mean, I know some of the names. And actually, it's funny because when I do the crossword puzzles, a lot of times something will come up, the comic hero, Green, and I say, oh, Green Arrow. So it does help me. But yeah, I guess I was pretty much Superman and Batman. I watched Batman, all the Batmans on TV and all the different villains with Batman. And those were the two.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. You hear that a lot. And even, in all these people I've interviewed for the documentaries and the podcast, in a lot of cases, the first introduction is that comic book. But in a lot of instances, people are meeting these characters through one of the adaptations. So I've really come to appreciate just how important the movies and the TV shows are, because for, Adventures of Superman, like for a whole generation, I mean, probably multiple generations because of syndication, like that was Superman to them.
Yeah.
So it's always interesting. So, well, I guess the last thing on the Superman thing, and then I want to talk a little bit about the comic shop visits. But as far as Superman, then you watch Lois and Clark.
Yes,
right?
Which I really liked. I think I would say that was probably my favorite one.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that.
I like that. Well, I like the Dean Cain and the Terry Hatcher, and I really enjoyed that one. But I liked it. It was good. Some of the things got crazy, like when they were going to. I can't think of what they did, but when they cloned themselves, that whole thing, they ate a frog. Do you remember that? And I was like, oh, this is crazy.
I not only do I remember that, do you remember, I wrote a paper in college where it was for a writing class, and we had to, I think the assignment was to take a phrase and come up with an alternate version, or in any event, that's the direction that I went in. I don't know what the overall assignment was, but I think it was something like that. And I'm sure you're familiar with the phrase "jump the shark," like when a once great television show starts to go downhill, taken from Happy Days. And so the little essay that I wrote was changing jump the shark to eat the frog. And I wrote all about how Lois and Clark took this weird turn where Lois was cloned and the clone ate a frog. Yeah, that was a pretty low moment for the show.
Yeah, that's when I didn't like it anymore.
But I get why you like the show generally. I mean, it definitely focused more on the romance and the relationship. Right. And it was, although in the later seasons, they did get more into the superhero side, even more so. But I think in the very beginning, it really was more of the romantic comedy almost. And then you watched a little Smallville. Right.
And I watched Smallville. Yeah. And I like that too.
And now you're watching Superman and Lois.
Yes, I watched the first 2 episodes, and I like it. It's good. It's a lot different. Even just the look of Superman. I think just from his physical appearance, he looks a lot different in his costume than the rest of them.
Yeah.
No, really. Yeah. I think the rest of them were taller and more of a V shape. He's a little bit, smaller and more of a box shape. So, he just looks, not that typical Superman. But also, and Lois, she's okay. I might have picked somebody else to play Lois if you want my critique. But he's a little too severe for me. I would like someone a little nicer for him. But, and I like the kids, but it's kind of, the one kid that's really, great athlete and all this stuff, and the other one who has the issues, but he's the one that turns out, obviously, to have the powers. But I'm curious to see where it goes and what happens. But he's definitely, when I'm watching him out of costume, I'm really not thinking of him so much as Superman. And when he's in costume, I even say, well, he doesn't really look like the typical Superman. But that's good.
Yeah. No, I think that's the biggest strength of the show, is that the non-costume part is so strong that it's like when he suits up, I'm like, oh, okay. I'm more interested in what's going on at the farm and on the football field than I am in the skies as he's flying around, which again, I never really thought I would see a Superman show like that. So I'm very pleasantly surprised by it. So you've had this running thread with Superman.
Right. No, and part of it, too, is to reach an audience that's, concerned with the story part, too, more so than just the character. So that's how they reach a wider range of people, because it is more of a story and what's going on. And I could see, if you're not really into a superhero, you don't need to be to watch. I don't know. You can't see my notes, but to watch Superman and Lois. Let me make sure I covered everything on here. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah.
All right. Well, if anything else comes up, let me know. I'm not done yet though, because I do want to talk about the comic shop visit. So let me run through these quickly, and then we can go further in on some of them. But I'm just thinking about the stores that we went to, right? So in Westchester, of course, we had Heroes World, One If by Cards, Two If by Comics, of course, obviously alternate realities, Dragon's Den, the 2 locations. There was Comics Plus in Mount Kisco, which, we had no idea at the time. I was a really little kid, but that was the store owned by one of the alternate realities founders.
Okay.
And we went there once. I think that was a one-time thing, but we went there. And then there was that store in the Jefferson Valley Mall when we would go with Marie and Fred, as we call my grandparents. But that Jefferson Valley, there was a comic store there. I don't know if you remember that. I don't remember what it was called.
No, I don't remember, but I recall it now that you say it.
But those are the ones, yeah.
No, because that would be the reason why we went to that mall, because there was a comic store.
I don't know about that. I feel like that was like a bonus for me or something. I don't know. I don't know that we went there for that. I feel like we were there, but I was happy that there was a comic shop.
And then there was the Bishop comic
Yeah, oh
store.
yeah, Comic Book Heaven. How could I forget about that? My goodness.
See? Yeah, that to me was I don't know. Yeah, that one was it was a whole different concept because they had all the art in there too, and they had the lady in there who ran it as well, which was unusual, which I didn't really see in the other shops. And then Bishop himself.
I mean, look, for people who listen to our show, I mean, we've mentioned Bishop a few times over the years. And in particular, I did a whole episode with one of the former workers there last year or the year before at this point. And so people, either have met Bishop, know who he is, or they at least know of him from our conversations. Bishop was a character for sure. And I mean, this came up in that episode that I did with Saad, the former employee there. But I mean, he would share a lot, right? Because like you had a lot of conversations with him, and he would just like tell you all about his personal life, right?
Yeah, I know. Well, I guess the need to talk, and I guess a lot of guys come in. The guys probably don't want to hear that kind of drama, and so there's some women in there with a kid, and I figure she'll listen. But yeah, he was I just chalked it up to was like his need to talk, and vent or complain about something was going on. But but he was very talkative. Unlike Steve, alternate realities, who is not very talkative. And the first time he talked to me, he yelled at us.
Did he really?
No, that was no. Remember with the comic books when you were ordering them and then you didn't pick them up, you picked them from the shelf?
Yeah. So I've mentioned this before, but let me just lay this out real quick because people might be like, what? Because, we've talked so much about delinquent customers. There was this weird period where I had a pull list, and it was just the Superman books, and they were held behind the counter, so they weren't accessible like they were years later, where you would just go to the file cabinet. And there were a few instances where I guess, and it wasn't Odo, I think it was Steve Chin at the time, because there was that other Steve that he owned the store with for a brief period. And I don't know, maybe he was talking to someone, and I was also exceedingly shy at this point.
Yes.
And rather than like interrupt and ask to get my stuff, I would just grab it off the shelf. Now, of course, I recognize now that was not the right thing to do because the books that had been ordered for me were sitting, on a shelf there. So obviously I wouldn't do that now. But yes, as a very shy kid at the time, that did happen. And then, yes, Odo ultimately called us out on that.
Corrected me. I explained that to him. I said, well, he doesn't know. And do you think I'm going to know what to do? But he was very nice. And I like that he was in there with his mom and his dad would be in there with him, especially his dad. He was really a nice man. So that was like a very like comfortable home type kind of a shop.
And he was a lawyer. I mean, the fact that he was a lawyer, what impression did that make?
I said, I won't say what I really want to say, but I said, he's a lawyer. What is he doing here?
Well, no, I mean, right. So, no, but I get, honestly, I think that's understandable.
No, but the fact that he was a lawyer. So I said, okay, he is bright, he's brilliant, and this is what he likes, this is what he wants to do. And you could tell talking to him, he's Steve. He is Steve.
So. That is true. I know. I guess that's the thing, right? Like each store, and we talked about this when we did our, Westchester County run through, a couple seasons ago. But each of those Westchester stores like really had their own flavor. I mean, you go into One If by Cards, Two If by Comics, now American Legends. Like that was always very clean to this day, clean and neat. And it's a husband and wife team, so that was a little different. At Comic Book Heaven, again, you had the late Irene, behind the counter. Again, you did have Donna at One If by Cards, but again, still seeing a woman behind the counter was a little bit different. Bishop, very much a character, shared way more than he probably should have. You had long-haired former attorney Odo at Alternate Realities. Dragon's Den, I just remember at the Cross County location, I think the guy was like hitting on you that time, where he said like you look like Lorraine Bracco.
Yes, I know. And then he started yelling at us or something, right? Did he yell at us? I don't remember what happened. But then we didn't go there anymore.
I don't remember that. He yelled at us? About what?
I think so. I don't know, something about the comics. I don't recall 100%. But then we didn't go there anymore.
I know. We had a nice routine though. Remember, we used to pack sandwiches and eat them in the car, and then we would go into. And I know you listened to some of those episodes, and I talked with Chris Wilcock about cross county generally, and that's very sad. But the woman who would push around the doll in the carriage, that really always stood out.
Yeah. And I mean, I enjoy doing all. Actually, Anthony, I think maybe we could do something like that again. We could pack lunch, go to a comic store. Like, I like to go to some of your Fat Moose comics with you one day.
Oh, we can go. Well, Sean Hendricks would love that.
Yeah, we can go have a drink, because I see he's big on that.
There you go, Sean.
I think it would be fun, because that was something you liked, and I really, you were my world, so I enjoy doing everything with you, no matter, what it was. And so, it was fun, and we made a whole little event of it, and, we'd go to the different places, and then we'd either bring lunch, buy lunch, or go someplace afterwards. So it was fun. But yeah, cross county, it's changed so much now. I don't know if you've been there, but now it's Ridge Hill. It's it's not Ridge Hill, but it's completely different. The whole thing is redone. But yeah, so we went to all those places.
Did you have, out of the Westchester stores, we'll leave alternate realities off, because of course that's everyone's favorite. But the other stores, was there a favorite one that you were like, either you actually looked forward to going into, or you were like, all right, this won't be so bad?
Well, I like the one where Donna was. And when you did the episode that you had Donna and Mom, because, she was someone I could, talk to and relate to. And, we talk about things other than comics, like vacations and, when she got married, so it was a little different. But, you also have to remember, like, I went with you to all these stores. Like, I didn't know really anything about comic shops and what goes on in there. And you were just a kid, so you didn't know either. So we were like going in there, the blind leading the blind. And, we figured it out, as we went along. But I definitely knew that most of the people, though, that were in the comic stores working were really pretty much, nice, laid back people, and so it was always like a nice atmosphere in that sense. I mean, for me, no, there weren't things for me to look at that I would like clothes or something. But, I remember the one in the city. When we would go to that one, they had upstairs, and they had other things upstairs, a little more interesting than just the comic books. But yeah, but overall, it's a comic book shop. It's not a girly shop where you're going to get your hair done. But that's something, I'm just thinking they could have made a manicure shop in one of those things. So boys with mothers, the mothers could go and get their nails done, like the store where we shopped when you were in elementary school and high school, and they had dressing rooms, boys with mothers.
Yes. Yeah. For the record, that was not when I was in high school, though. But yeah, that was Epstein's, right? In Ardsley? Where was that?
In Tuckahoe.
Tuckahoe, yeah. Which sadly closed because our dentist is right around there, and I passed there. But yeah, I used to have to go there because I needed husky pants.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes I do think if the comic stores had something else in there for the people that are bringing the younger children, even in Barnes and Noble, a little coffee shop, and so the mothers could sit, and I would sit. I remember in alternate realities, a lot of times I didn't go in; I would sit out in the car. But I would watch all the people that came in and out, and I would try and think up stories about them, what their life was about. And the one that I remember the most is the one on the bicycle.
Yeah, Brian Claudio.
Yeah, I remember him the most. And he'd go in the rain and the snow, and I'd see him on the bicycle, and I was like, oh, he must be so dedicated to these comic books. Who would be out on a bicycle in the snow? So,
yeah.
So I used to watch, the comings and goings, too, as well.
Yeah. No, I know. Brian Claudio, I know, always dressed, head to toe in black. Summer,
yes.
No matter the season, and on his bicycle, rain or shine. And, I would end up filming his collection for that first documentary. So I went to, his house, and he's the sweetest guy. But yeah, I know you really do see a mix of people. And I think, well, even though, despite getting yelled at by Odo and maybe the Dragon's Den, I really don't remember that. But yeah, generally I think, one consistent theme is, is really a nice group of people at these stores, which is lovely. But, to your other point, and I know you've seen My Comic Shop Country. It's you do see in a lot of these stores, there are more attempts at things like that, like the store in Philadelphia that's also a coffee house, or, you know, right by us, All Yeah Comics. Like, they're all about the, you know, the kids, all ages, like all ages friendly. So I think you are seeing a lot more variety in and different types of flavors in terms of like who stores are catering to.
Yeah, no, which makes sense, because even if, you know, if it's a place like they have coffee, like you want a cup of coffee, you say, oh, let me get coffee. And then you see some other things. And I might say, like, as a mother or grandmother, oh, maybe my grandson would like this. And I would pick it up, you know. But if you don't have any attraction to people other than who are interested in comics, then, you know, it doesn't expand beyond that group. And I would think the idea is always to expand, you know, to everybody.
I will say, though, because I thought about this when you said the blind leading the blind, the thing I always come back to is, and I don't know if you would remember this, but, you know, well, I know you remember this. Throughout the 90s, I was only allowed to read the Superman comics. And there were 4 Superman titles. Each one came out monthly. So in effect, you had a weekly Superman comic. And that's what I was allowed to read. And I was able to negotiate for like Supergirl and JLA because that involved Superman. But that's what I was reading. But the thing that I was going to say is, do you remember? So again, you had 4 Superman titles. Each title had its own numbering system. But then they had the triangle numbers on the cover to give you the weekly reading order. And do you remember we could not figure that out?
Yes. Now that you're saying it, I forgot all about it. Yeah, I remember that little triangle. We didn't. Yep, I remember that. But I guess I remember limiting you to only because you had to, you know, keep your academics going as well as your.
To bring this all full circle. But yeah, so you took me to all those shops, and then, you know, there were stores in the city. I mean, I know we went to like a bunch over the years, but the most consistent was Midtown Comics that we would go to. And you took me to a Frank Miller signing there. Do you remember that? Yes,
I remember that, waiting in line, and we're standing there, and then, we finally went in and you got it signed. I was excited too, but I remember that.
Yeah, no, I do. I mean, and that I still have.
We waited like 3 hours, right? Or was it?
I don't remember how long. It probably was a while. Like, I remember we were outside. I mean, I remember we were out on the street, so we still had to make our way. I mean, those stairs. Remember those stairs?
Yes, I know, all the way up. I know, but that was fun. We sat. I think I went into a store and then I came back because it was I liked when we went into the city, because once you got a little bit older, I could leave you in the store, and then how old are you? 17? No, I'm kidding.
It was a couple of years ago.
I said, okay, now you can stay. And I used to tell the guy on my way out, can you keep an eye on him? No. And then I would be able to go to other stores and stuff. But and I know this isn't comic related, but I also liked when we used to go to the NBA store.
Yeah, that was fun.
We had the whole basketball thing. I did like that too, and I liked going there.
I know. So. Yeah, it's funny. I do think about that from time to time. Like I miss following basketball, and I could get back. So I don't have the time, but that was fun. Like I enjoyed watching, and we would go to the games, and we would go to the NBA store, get those peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. That was fun.
Yeah. No, and I liked going to the games too. So so that was good. But of course, we did get a lot of Patrick Ewing plaques and whoever you were into at the time. So you collected for that too. And then you also collected cards. Remember, you had different cards.
Yeah, the basketball cards, funny enough, I don't know if I mentioned, maybe I did mention this, but when we were about to move over the summer, I brought my cards to American Legends to try to sell them.
Oh, okay.
Because I've had them in a box for a years and years, probably 2 decades at this point, and where I haven't done anything with them. And Mark and Donna took a look, and they quoted me a price, and it was just, I appreciated them going through them, but it was so low that it was like, I would rather donate these at this point, So I ended up just keeping them, but they're still in a closet. Well, is there anything else that you would like to say before we sign off here? Anything we didn't get to that you wanted to talk about on your notes or otherwise?
Well, this isn't on my notes, but this just came into my mind, how you had all the comics in the attic, and then you had to take them out because it was too warm for them.
That's right. What's so funny about that?
I thought that was so funny that they were too warm. And when I would tell the story, I said they were in the attic, but then they were too warm. But that's how you were so, obsessive with your stuff and how it had to be perfect. And, the bag, and I couldn't even touch anything. It was like, I would just like go and grab something. So you were really like, so if you wonder why people are nervous with you when talking comics, that could be the reason why you were very, very like with, and I'll say now, like when Milo gets bigger, like if he goes to touch your statues, or you're just not going to let him in your studio, that could be.
I know, it's funny. He only comes in when he's only in here if I'm holding him.
Yeah.
I haven't let him have, because I have, in addition to the books and the statues, I have all my equipment in here. So I really do have to be careful. But yeah, I've definitely relaxed a lot on that front. The equipment is one thing. That's probably what as far as my stuff, that's probably what I'm most protective of now. And I don't really have single issues anymore of comics. Very few.
Right. You just have the
graphic novels. So it's like, at a certain point, when he's actually when you can actually, I guess here's the thing, over the next couple of years, would I give him one of my graphic novels, just to kind of tear up for something to do? No. That being said, when he gets old enough to read them, if he's not delicate with them, but he's actually reading them, or, he's enjoying them, looking at the pictures or whatever, that's fine. That's fine. I don't care. I would rather he has the enjoyment, and it keeps him busy for a few minutes.
Right.
Know?
Well, and that just gave me an idea. Once, when you and Steph are not home and I'm there with Milo, I'm going to take him into your studio and I'm going to tell him that he can touch all the figures, and we won't tell you. Like you used to do to the clock in the living room. You used to twirl it when I went down to the laundry room. Yeah,
I know. You probably are going to do that, aren't you?
I am, because that's the way I am. I'll say, let's touch them, but don't tell Daddy. No.
Well, we'll see.
But I enjoyed all the comics with you, and it was, it was just, everything was always a nice time when I let you read them.
Well, Mother, you were a wonderful guest. You really were.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm glad. I know I'm silly a little bit, but
no, this was great. Did you enjoy being on the podcast?
Yes, I did. The only thing I don't like is my ears are full of tape. But other than that, because I have an issue with my ears, I can't put those little pods in them. I need things that go on the out, like you have, I would need.
I know. Well,
but I taped my ears for you.
I appreciate
and
that.
your audience, which you have. You're developing a very big audience. And I listen sometimes, not all the time, but I'm not as technology friendly as the younger generation. But I try my best.
Well, listen, you can tell people I do podcasts, and you know what that is, and that's a plus,
Oh, yeah, I do. I always tell everybody all the things that you do. And I'm happy that, you like doing this, and I hope it comes into something, greater still.
Yes. Well, we honestly, in and of itself, I really enjoy it, and it's been a great outlet. So even if this were it, quote unquote it, it's still worthwhile. But yeah, always hoping to continue to grow this enterprise. But really, thank you very much. This was a lot of fun. And,
you're welcome.
And happy Mother's Day.
Yes, well, still, we have a while to Mother's Day.
Well, when listeners hear this, it'll be very close to Mother's Day.
Oh, well, bleep. Sorry.
That's okay.
Spoiler. Yes, well, I will. I'll have a wonderful Mother's Day. Thank you so much. All right. Enjoy the rest of your day.
All right, you too. Thank you very much. So thank you very much to my mother for being part of this episode of the LongAR Halloween. We'll be back next month with, this is the one I know everyone's been waiting for. We'll be back next month with someone who's been like a father to many of us at Alternate Realities, Steve Odo. So the big Steve Odo Father's Day episode is coming up in 1 month. 2 weeks after that is My Comic Shop History's 100th episode spectacular with an all-star roster of guests. Like, you really don't want to miss this one. This one's going to be a lot of fun. And of course, we continue to put out new episodes of Digging for Kryptonite and My Comic Shop Book Club. There's extra content on the Anthony Desiato Patreon page. So I hope you will check out all of that. Happy Mother's Day to all of the moms out there. And of course, as always, remember, don't be a flat squirrel. My Comic Shop History is a Flat Squirrel production. Art by Philtastic Phil Menza, music by Basic Printer. If you like what you heard, be sure to listen to Digging for Kryptonite, available on most major podcast platforms. Sign up for exclusive content at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato and watch My Comic Shop Country, out now on Apple TV and Amazon.